Welcome to Making Eating Healthy Again, the podcast where we simplify the complexities of modern nutrition and guide you back to the basics of wholesome eating. In today's world, dietary recommendations become a maze of conflicting advice and overwhelming research and trending fads that make eating healthy feel more like an unsolvable puzzle. Each day brings new headlines on superfoods, diet plans, and miracle supplements, leaving us more confused than ever about what we should really be eating. Join us as we cut through the noise to uncover simple, science-backed practices that can transform your health, delight your taste buds, and make eating healthy a joyous journey once more. Whether you're a seasoned foodie or just beginning your quest for better health, we've got you covered with insights, motivational stories, and practical tips. I'm Woody Huffines, and I am fortunate to be able to join registered dietitian Danielle Carr each week to talk to you about how you can make eating healthy again.
Okay.
Let's talk about what we're going to do today. My name's Woody Huffines. I'm with a good friend, Danielle Carr. And we're talking about putting together a podcast for the stuff that we find fascinating or exciting or important. And it's the Make Eating Healthy Again podcast. So we thought we would start out with a discussion about how we got to where we are in our process of determining what we believe to be healthy eating and how we can help others find out what healthy eating looks like.
Love it. Yeah, we're living in a world that unfortunately so much is dividing us, right? When we need to be united in how we can make America healthy again. And so I'm excited to do this podcast because I think it's going to be able, or I know it's going to be able to help people figure out, come from our expertise and our experiences and our journey and be able to teach kind of what we know and what does make America eat healthy again.
It's funny, as I'm involved in social media and I look at things where people talk about how they got to where they are, whether it's carnivore or keto or ketovore or any of the alternate ways of eating. I'm not a vegan. I've never been a vegan. I couldn't be a vegan. It wouldn't work for me. But I respect people who, even though I fundamentally disagree that that's a healthy way of eating, I respect that people are at least thinking in terms of, I'm not going to eat the crap that's in the middle of the grocery store.
Yeah.
Okay. I spend more time in the meat department. They spend more time in the produce. But at the end of the day, we're not eating things that come in bags and boxes and bottles with barcodes.
Yeah.
And anybody that at least gets to the point that they're not eating things that come bags, boxes, bottles with barcodes, we have common ground that we can talk about rationally.
Very true. I've been in this industry for so long that sometimes I have to remind myself that, understandably, people don't know or they forget, just eat the perimeter of the grocery store. And I think it's because those types of things that we hear is just like, oh yeah, okay, eat the perimeter of the grocery store. But I think a lot of people don't really realize what that means, or that when you're going into the aisles, what are you actually getting? And reading the food labels and what does that mean? I think people are, unfortunately, we're not educated with this from what we should be educated from, like kindergarten, right? We should grow up with this. And what are we putting into our bodies in these beautiful machines that make us be able to move and think and focus and do the things that we are best designed to do? And so there's really not that education. So when people hear go around the perimeter of the grocery store, or just look at the labels, and if there's things you can't pronounce, don't eat it. Or if you don't really know why or understand that, why are you going to do it? There's no motivation there.
And that's I think where I would probably disagree with you is that they are educated. They're just educated wrong. There was a guy that was named Ken Hubbard, and one of my favorite quotes of Ken Hubbard's was, he said that it's not what you know that hurts you. I'm sorry, it's not what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you know that ain't so. When I think a lot of the problem that we got into, and we'll have episodes, I'm sure, to talk about how we got to where we are as an industry or as a way of eating, as opposed to just how you got to where you believe and how I got to where I believe. But when the USDA got into the business of teaching people how to eat with the food pyramid is when things started going sideways.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I agree that we need to educate people about what they need to eat, and people need to spend some time thinking about it. But the thing for me that's made it particularly tough is the first step is to uneducate them for all the stuff they've been taught about seed oils or about eat 11 to 12 servings of grains a day. Or, I mean, there's a bunch of things that you have to unteach people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I was in that world, fully into that world as a dietitian.
Well, talk about your educational background, because we go post the podcast. You're going to have a bunch of letters after your name, and I don't. So let's talk about what that means in terms of your education and how that education started you, and what it does, what the education. One of the things we talk about in the computer business is when you do things with computers, the computer does things to you and it does things for you.
Yeah.
And I think your education probably was the same way. Your education did things for you, but it also did things to you. Is that part of how this path to getting to where you are now started?
Yeah. So when I was 16, my parents had started a women's only fitness center. And so I started in the fitness business. I mean, a little bit before that, I saw them working out ever since I was 7 years old, right? Started to watch kind of what they do. Feel very fortunate to have grown up in that. They were never forceful about it, which was great. I'm kind of the only one in the family that's really gone crazy with all this nutrition and exercise part. But I do feel very fortunate that I grew up watching them. And then again, when I was 16, they opened up a women's only fitness center, and then continued to open up to where we had 13 gyms at one point. So I was fully involved in it, right? When I went to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My parents, I'm thankful that they said, you know exercise, nutrition, because I was a personal trainer. Why don't you just start with this? I'm like, all right. So it worked out, which is great. One of the very few that actually still do something with that degree. And being a dietitian is one of the greatest things, but going through school, I'm thankful for what I went through, but it definitely did things to me, and it did things for me. It kind of did things against me, because I followed what we were taught, which was also funded by all these other companies, right? Coca-Cola, Dairy Council. We were taught the food guide pyramid. We were taught eat all the grains that you can. Don't worry about corn. Don't worry about, there's certain vegetables that might inflame your body. I mean, we learned about inflammation, but never really, it's completely different than what we know today. Seed oils. I mean, I was kind of fine with canola oil back then and any vegetable oils. What I was taught then, and it was basically the food guide pyramid, which is what I go completely against now. So my education did so much for me. In the way of what I learned, I had to relearn. It did so much for me in learning the biochemistry of our body, right? But all that stuff about food, yes, I learned about how it affects our body, and that was great. But I had to relearn on, okay, wait a minute. How does this work in the biochemistry of our body and our hormones? We didn't really get into that.
It's interesting. My wife is a nurse anesthetist, and so nurse first. Yep. And the nutrition professor wanted her to become a dietitian because she just loved it and she ate it up. And that's one of the things that she says. And so when we got married and she was going to make some taco soup, and I'm like, no, I'm going to skip the taco soup. And she's like, why? And I was like, it's got beans in it, and I don't really want to eat that many carbs in the beans. And she was like, look, I'm a nurse. I've had nutrition. I was like, then you understand the biochemistry. Let me give you a couple of things to read, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah.
And to her everlasting credit, she was able to make the connection that the biochemistry that they taught me is not in line with the food recommendations that they gave me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And that was for her. To her credit, she was able to make that shift. What moved you towards making that shift to say, you know what, I've got a disconnect here. I got to do something about it?
So actually it was personal for me. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. I had pain in my hip, pain in my back. I had a limp actually most of college. I was going to start cheering. I went to Texas Tech, going to start cheering, hopefully, and woke up one day just literally feeling, it was thankfully not long-term, but paralyzed. Like I just couldn't move from my waist down. I had to crawl off the bed. It was 4 a.m. I had to crawl off the bed and getting to a computer, what little was on, I don't even know if it was Google then. Maybe it was Ask Jeeves. Do you remember Ask Jeeves?
Oh, yeah, Jeeves. Yeah. I remember Jeeves. I remember Alta Vista.
Yeah.
I remember Links. Yeah.
I love Jeeves. I don't know I'm sure it was that then. Anyway, trying to figure out what's wrong. And there were so many different things. Found out herniated disc, but deep in my mind, I didn't feel like the herniated disc was everything. There was different pain there. I felt like I got hit by a truck or a train and just rolled over like I was nothing. I mean, it was so bad. This went on for about 7 years.
Wow.
And then again, diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in my spine. I had a test actually done 2 years ago. I forgot about this, and they couldn't find any rheumatoid arthritis anymore, which is pretty amazing. I had acne. I was on Accutane when I was younger. I had headaches. I didn't realize I had trouble sleeping, but I definitely had trouble sleeping. I couldn't focus. My ADD was way out of control. Didn't realize that actually could be pretty much fixed. Not all the way. You'll hear in the podcast. Sometimes I'm like, woo, squirrel, but I'll come back. And so I had just randomly come across, I started doing some research on hormones and getting to the root cause of the issue. And this was like 20 years ago. There was not this education out there. There's not Instagram and social media and Google research. I mean, there was nothing out there. But I just started to do some research, right? I'm like, well, I had been on birth control since I was 16. Started to realize that can be some endocrine type of disruptor. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna strip everything out of my diet, and I'm just gonna do basically an anti-inflammatory plan, which was not a thing back then. I had no idea what I was doing, but I'm gonna take out dairy, corn, soy, try and do basically all GMOs, which I was still kind of learning about that back then. And I had completely healed my body. It was a miracle. I thought it was just like, I mean, I had stopped running. I remember when I was dating my now husband, I had told him like, hey, one day, I just want you to know I'm probably going to have like full blown fibromyalgia. Like there's so much more in this story that I could say, but it was just such bad pain. And all of a sudden I just like realized there was no pain anymore. And I started to add things back into my plan. Like I realized like when I had drank, not Pinot Noir wine, like any type of Zinfandel, any Merlot, I would get pain again, right? Or then when I started to eat any type of dairy, all of a sudden, like my acne would come back and I would have a little bit of pain. And then it would get progressively worse when I had started eating dairy for a couple of weeks.
The poison's in the dose.
Yeah, exactly. And so I started to really key in and think, okay, this is what they mean by scientists mean, hormone experts mean by getting to the root cause. Like, what is this? So I started to realize the more I put into my plan, different foods would affect me. And so then I love science and I love research and I love to play with things. And so I became my own guinea pig. And that's really, that's where it started. And then I started to take this into my practice. And so being a dietitian, meet with people one-on-one, I love it. It's 80, I want to say 90% is counseling more than anything, right? I tell clients, we're not even going to get to the food possibly for a few months. We'll talk about food, but a lot of it is our counseling and what are we doing in our day and who's supporting us and what's going on and what are the things in your past. And so doing that, again, I loved counseling, but a lot of my clients would see results, but for some reason people were stopping quick, right? Whether it was 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, they would see a little bit of change, but nothing really kept the movement going. And I'm thinking, you lost 8 pounds or you've lost 10 pounds. But I realized we weren't getting to the root cause of the issue and we were stripping everything down and we weren't seeing results fast enough for them to want to keep going. And so again, I started to dig more into research and that's when they started to become my guinea pigs, right? And when I could get people fast results, like an average of up to 20 pounds in 30 days, which again, I was taught, which I still believe to a certain extent or at a certain point, fast weight loss is bad, right? When I was taught so much that we don't want to lose weight fast. If you're starting to lose fast, there's something going wrong. And so to relearn, these people are losing weight fast and feeling fantastic and wanting to continue. And I had people with me 2 years, even though they still reached their goal, but realizing the mental part of it, that's when I started to shift. And that's when I started to see, okay, I'm going to dig even more into hormones and I'm going to dig more into what's the root cause and what's going on with our body and how can we get people to strip things from their diet and actually want to and how to do it and how to make it fun and healthy. And yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it would be unfair to say envious of people who had inflammatory problems or inflammatory issues. My entry into all of the low carb, beginning with low carb or Atkins, was because I'm fat, and I've been fat. I was a fat little kid. I was a fat football player. I've always been heavier than I wanted to be, and the weight loss was that's where I got into this. In 1996, Michael and Mary Dan Eads wrote a book called Protein Power that talked about you doing protein.
Okay.
Long before that, Robert Atkins, had written the Atkins diet.
Mm-hmm.
And Atkins was the first person really to talk about ketones and that getting into ketosis was a good thing.
Yeah.
And my mom was always woo-woo. She did, whether it's essential oils or Chinese exercise balls or something, she was always woo-woo about some of this stuff. And she was telling me I needed to eat the Atkins diet because I was heavy. And I would tell her all the time, Mom, it doesn't matter. It's, conservation of mass and energy. It's not just a good idea. It's the law.
Yeah.
I don't care if you eat 400 calories. If you eat 4,000 calories of broccoli a day, you're going to weigh more than you want to weigh. And having you got to eat this or that or whatever. I'm just not, I don't. Right. No. I'm not a big Atkins guy.
Yeah.
And she called me one Sunday afternoon and she said, you have to watch 60 Minutes tonight because Dr. Atkins is going to be on 60 Minutes.
Okay.
And I was like,
and how old were you at this time?
I was 30.
Okay.
30, early 30s maybe.
Okay.
And so okay, Mom, I'll watch Dr. Atkins. And so Atkins is talking about what his way of eating would be, which is basically the food pyramid upside down. Uh-huh. It's like the government is completely wrong. You need to eat a lot of fats and almost no carbs.
Okay.
And the interviewer, and I don't remember which one it was one of the rule following 60 Minutes ladies that could do the rat face thing. And she goes, she gets the little pickle face and she goes, so you're saying you know more than the federal government?
Oh, God forbid.
And Dr. Atkins said, who doesn't?
I need to watch this.
And then I was like, okay, I have found myself arguing on the side of the federal government. Maybe I need to check my whole card. This doesn't seem right. And so I started eating the Atkins diet.
Okay.
And I lost, 50 pounds over 6 months.
Wow.
But here's what was interesting. At the end of that, I went to my doctor for my yearly checkup at the end of the year. Around Christmas is when I was going to the doctor at that time. And my doctor he was doing jumping jacks. Your cholesterol's down to 190 from 220 and your triglycerides are this and my triglycerides were under 100 and your HDL's up and your LD. He was just ecstatic with all these lab test numbers. Yeah. He said, so what have you done? I said, well, I'm eating Atkins. And he freaks out. Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
You can't do that. I can't recommend that you eat Atkins. The American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, the American Cancer Society, blah, 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 blah. He goes through this long list of people. And that was the first time that I ran into this. You were happy with the numbers from a science perspective, but then when I get there in a way that you don't approve, you chew a hole in me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like, go ahead.
What am I not following here? Mm-hmm.
Well, they're just going to all the
and so I started. I started gaining weight because I quit eating. My doctor freaked out. He freaked out.
Oh wow!
So I was like, oh well, maybe there's going to be some kind of long-term harm for this. We don't because the argument was, this hasn't been studied. You don't know what the long-term ramifications are. This is not the science hasn't been done on this. Mm-hmm. And so the next interface that I had with that reaction at my salary grade level when I was working at Span River site in Aiken, South Carolina, we all had like a health day where we went into a big room and they did your cholesterol and they checked your blood sugar and they checked your this and they checked you and they did carotid surveys with ultrasound and heart and just did a general health screening for all the people that were at some level of salary grade because that usually implied age as well. And one of the pieces of that was a counseling session with the guy that was the head of the diabetes prevention clinic at the hospital. And so he sits down with me, and I was eating more carbs, but I was up to 40 carbs a day at the time, 25 to 40 carbs a day.
Okay.
And I sit down with the guy and he goes, man, your cholesterol's great, everything's good. It's just, do you have any questions? I said, no, not really. I'm pretty happy with my diet and the way it's working. He said, well, what do you do? I said, basically I don't eat more than about 35 or 40 grams of carbohydrates a day. And he does the, as a professional.
Yeah.
You're eating more than 40 grams of carbs a day.
Okay.
Because you're just, maybe we need to talk about what a carb is, because you can't be healthy and eat 40 grams of carbs a day. I'm like, well, dude, I feel pretty good. He said, well, so go, what are you eating a day? So we go through, and I don't eat, and it was more about what I don't eat. I don't eat bread. I don't eat rice. I don't eat potatoes. I don't eat root vegetables. I eat green vegetables. The only thing I eat that's white is cauliflower.
Yeah.
And he's like yesterday, what did you eat yesterday? Because he's not believing it. And finally I get down to where, dude, I'm telling you, I eat 20, 40 grams of carbs a day. And he was frustrated. He was like, your brain needs 100 grams of carbohydrates a day to function. If you eat less than 100 grams of carbohydrates a day, you'll just be stupid. I'm like, well, we seem to be doing okay. I mean, I'm talking and everything. I can find my way to work every day.
Yeah.
Which was the next place that I really ran into the experts going, this is just wrong. You can't do this. Uh-huh. And so I'm gaining weight and I'm not as healthy as I was, and I'm not feeling as well. And that's when I say I almost admire the people who have inflammation or arthritis or other, because for them, they can't eat that way. Their life is really degraded if they start eating the things that they shouldn't. For me, I just get heavier.
Yeah, there's that immediate desire.
I feel fine, and there ain't nothing on me that hurts.
Right.
And okay, I probably need to lose 40 pounds, but it's not affecting my life. I'm not having trouble getting out of bed in the morning. And we can talk about that. But in terms of my journey, that was a seminal moment for me, where this guy is treating me like I'm an idiot, mm-hmm. because what I'm telling him cannot be true in his worldview. You cannot eat less than 100 grams of carbs a day. Mm-hmm. That will not work. It is impossible.
And how that second guy that you were talking to, how old were you then? Same?
35.
Okay, so it's been a few years, maybe.
Yeah.
You're still early 30s.
I mean,
okay.
I was not, and I've never been nearly as good about not eating carbohydrates as I would like to be. But the point is, early on in this journey that I've taken, it became pretty apparent that these people that are the experts had a dogmatic, doctrinaire view of what was possible and what wasn't.
Sure.
Let me check to make sure that the cameras are still running.
Mm-hmm. That's funny. I was just saying.
Sweet.
Yay.
So I would imagine that in terms of people that are doctrinaire and science-based and chewing a hole in you in the dietitian world, you experience that in spades.
Yeah. It's pretty, right. Unfortunately, doctors they go through one nutrition class. One. That's it. Unless something's changing. I hope it does.
Well, and one of the doctors, maybe Eric Westman. I mean, we can talk about a bunch of experts that I followed over the years, but one of the doctors was talking about it. May have been Ken Berry. That the nutrition class that he had was what you needed to put in the tube to feed somebody that was in a constant vegetative state or in a coma or in ICU. Mm-hmm. It was here's the bag of nutrients that you need to hang on somebody to keep them alive until they're out of ICU. And that was his nutrition class. It wasn't even about how you navigate in the world and eat.
Oh yeah, that's most of my clinical experience was enteral and parenteral nutrition. Whether you're feeding through the gut, with the tube, or you're feeding through the vein, and due to different situations that's going on. To go a little bit more on you, though, because you are one of the smartest people that I have met. I mean, when I talk to Woody,
get out more.
I know I need to get out more. Kidding. When I talk to Woody, it's like die, which poo 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 poo, and the stuff that you recall is insane. I mean, I think this is why you and my husband get along so well. It's like two elephant brains. They're sitting there, and then they just, it's amazing. And so, I'm always so thankful to talk to you because you know so much, you've researched so much, you have so much to share. Is that what got you into the research, or how do you know so much about all of this and care?
The first, in July of 2002, Gary Taubes, who's one of my heroes, if I had a low carb Mount Rushmore, Gary Taubes would certainly be on my low carb Mount Rushmore. So he was writing for the New York Times Magazine, and he wrote an article, and it came out in July of 2002. The New York Times Magazine asked him to do an article on the Atkins diet. So he went out and started doing some research on the Atkins diet. And one of his primary criticisms about the nutrition world, and all this relates back to where you're asking me, how did I get into the science of this? I've always been a fan of science, but one of the criticisms that Gary Taubes has of the nutrition world is if you're in chemistry, did you take chemistry?
Oh yeah, that was my whole degree. Do you
remember that we talked about Boyle's gas law?
No.
Boyle's gas law. That's one of the things that you study in chemistry is Boyle's gas law.
Maybe if you tell me what this is, should I know this?
It has to do with the pressure temperature constant. The Boyle's how you relate pressure and temperature to a gas in the perfect gas law or the perfect gas law.
Sure.
But it was Boyle's. Or if you understand who Cavendish is, and you understand who Einstein is, and you understand in physics who did this, and in chemistry who did that, and there's a history that goes with any of the scientific principles that you learn. It's not just like it sprung out of Zeus's head and became science. As you learn in the hard sciences, there is a history of this is why you do this. This is who discovered that. This is the history of these things. And what he found in nutrition is that there's not. There's not that history. If you ask somebody in nutrition, if you ask somebody in chemistry, well, who discovered this concept of the way the electron is, then there are people, Cavendish, and they can tell you what the experiment was that he did.
Yeah.
In nutrition, they're just like, well, no, it's just the way it is. So he got frustrated in writing this article. And the title of the article, as I said, was, What If It's All Been a Big Fat Lie? And he looked at the history of how people were supposed to lose weight. And then he looked at what Atkins was saying and basically said in this article, Robert Atkins may be right.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that then torched me off about looking at what was the history, what was the information, how did we reach the conclusions that we've reached that generate the advice that we're given? Because now twice in my case, I'd run into my family doctor, and then I'd run into this guy that was the diabetes guy. I got treated like a second-class citizen, and like I was too dumb to pour pee out of a boot with instructions on the heel by the expert.
Mm-hmm.
And it really pushed me the wrong way that, if you want to think a bunch of things about me, I'm okay with that. But thinking I'm stupid is not on the list.
Mm-hmm.
So from Taubes, I started reading, especially Taubes' books. He wrote in 2004, Good Calories, Bad Calories.
Uh-huh.
In 2006, Why Do We Get Fat and What to Do About It. He's written The Case Against Sugar. He's written The Case for Keto. He's written Rethinking Diabetes. Always, any of Gary Taubes' books, which I would recommend to anybody, if you're interested in the science, they are researched to a fairly well, mm-hmm. and it goes through the whole history of how we got to where we got.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the thing that fascinated me and got me into thinking about it in terms of the science, was Gary Taubes' article, Why Do We Get Fat? The article, What If It's All Been a Big Fat Lie, about the Atkins diet, and then his first book, Good Calories, Bad Calories.
Okay. And yeah, because that's that's what you love to read about, right? Atkins, carnivore, the science part of it. That is your forte, you would say?
Well, that was my entree,
Okay.
but not necessarily forte. Yes, I've spent more time in that, and I had more time when I was younger to do those things. But the thing that's interesting about learning about keto or low carb or ketovore or carnivore, any one of these, wherever you get on the bus, whether you get on the bus at the Mediterranean diet and you're just cutting out some stuff and getting rid of the seed oils, or where, it doesn't matter where you get on the bus. After you get on the bus, it's going down the rabbit hole.
Right. Yeah.
And my entrance to the rabbit hole was keto.
Okay.
Some people's entrance to the rabbit hole is seed oils. Some people's entrance to the rabbit hole is statins or cholesterol. Some people's entrance to the rabbit hole is heart disease, and some people it's inflammation and arthritis, and some people it's mood.
Yep.
But we all go down that same rabbit hole and start asking hard questions about, now, you're telling me this and this and this, and my personal experience tells me that's not working for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Tom's is where I started. At this point, especially after COVID, well, I started with keto. Now, I have fired in the last 15 years. I've probably fired because I worked all over the country. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Augusta, Georgia. And so I would spend large periods of time in different places. And if I got sick, I'd have to go to a doctor. So I have fired multiple doctors about this low carb thing. Because as soon as you start telling me I've got to do this, that, or the other, that is not a low carb thing, you're done. You haven't kept up with science.
Sure.
You're a doctrinaire doofus, and I'm done. I'm not going to talk to you about this, and I'm certainly not going to give you any money.
Mm-hmm.
The range of wickets that a doctor now has to jump through for me to listen to a damn thing they say has gotten a lot longer and a lot more complex. Uh-huh. So yeah, I went down the rabbit. I went down the rabbit hole. We got into the rabbit warren through the carb hole. But now there are a bunch of other ways that you can get in, and a bunch of other things that are really interesting, that are fun to go research and look at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm excited for the podcast, and because we'll be a great team at this. I mean, you've experienced, you know the effects, you know the science of it. And when you get into that and you can start learning that, and then when you do it and you feel it in your body and you feel how everything changes, you can get in that rabbit hole. And that's where I was at with the hormones. And then I got into the rabbit hole of toxins and the pharmaceuticals and what food is paid for in our agricultural system. That's just so unfortunate. And you just I always tell my husband, hey, do you want to know the next new crazy thing today that I'm doing? Like right now, we don't have baby wipes in our house. And I wash my son, probably as you did with the kids, with cloth diapers. Were your kids in cloth diapers?
No, my kids weren't in cloth diapers. Eventually my second was out of cloth diapers.
Okay.
But eventually got out of cloth, but we were in cloth diapers for a long time, which is, you talk about the rabbit hole.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. I haven't done any of that research. And that's one of the things that's really my approach with people is I'm not going to say you cut out everything. And if you do this bad, you're not doing this bad. When I was as a dietitian in school and a little bit out of school, it was, it's calories in versus calories out. And there's there's no good and bad foods. And that has completely changed, right? There are bad foods, right? But in saying that, I've had to do a lot of relearning. I've had to take a lot of things out, but I'm very much about do little things at once, right? So we started with the wipes because I can use the bidet. We have a bidet and put my little son within the bidet or throw him in the bath, and it's easy and he likes it, so it's good. But so these small changes. So my next thought was always I wish I did cloth diapers, but I haven't gone down that rabbit hole. And these are one of the reasons why I love you, because you just spit out all of that information.
Well, it's the problem that I have is people say these doctrinaire things, like it's written on high that disposable diapers are bad for the environment And to do things that are good for the environment, you should use cotton diapers. Well, there are a bunch of underlying assumptions before you can make that statement.
Yes, with the cotton diapers, you just watch. I mean, you do all the things you said, but you're not throwing bags of diapers away every.
I've been driving around Texas. There's a whole bunch of ground out here we can bury trash in. I mean, it's not like we're running out of places to do landfills. And I'm not advocating for one versus the other in terms of health or the chemicals that you're putting on your kid when you have them disposable diapers. There's a bunch of things that we can have that discussion.
I was going to say that we'll have to definitely talk about that.
There's a lot of things you can have about a discussion about any of these things. The problem that I have is when you come out with a doctrinaire pronouncement that says this is good and that's bad, and then I start asking you questions about it, and you can't defend it other than, well, that's what I read in Time magazine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Very true. And I think we got off on that with saying with doctors, is that how we got there?
It's how I got into the science. It's how I started asking questions more deeply than I'm not going to accept that you're going to tell me that I should eat this or not eat that or do this and not do that. If I start asking hard questions and about 2 questions in, you're out of answers, then I'm not, personally, I do not feel obligated to take your advice. Now, you may make a couple of points, or you may ask me some questions that make me go look.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty much done with the expert says.
Yeah. Well, and the unfortunate thing about studies, and this might be another topic for another day, is that I think it's the peer-reviewed articles. If you ask a doctor, well, what do you think about those? Oh, they're great. That's the science of it. Well, there's so much hidden information, especially when they're run by pharmaceutical companies, that you don't read like 90% of the data that they have because they don't want to release it. So people read this research article and think, oh, okay, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. The study says this. There's so much hidden information, or the way that they use their subjects. You could probably talk a little bit better about that than I could, because you talk so much about research. But I believe that's the sad thing. People just believe what is given out there.
Well, and another piece of that was Robert Atkins was, the people at Harvard were saying that he was going to kill people. I mean, they wrote opinion pieces in scientific journals that he was effectively a mass murderer. If people are going to eat this way, there are going to be people going to be dead.
Yeah,
this is going to kill people. And there's been no studies. Like, if there's no randomized control trials, I don't believe this because there's not a randomized control trial. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm pretty sure there's never been a randomized control trial on a parachute. Mm-hmm. They didn't take 20 people and put them on an airplane, give half of them parachutes, the other half not parachutes, tell them to jump out and see who did better.
Right.
There's such a thing as clinical experience. And you know what? If you jump out of an airplane with a parachute, it works out a lot better than if you jump out without one.
Yeah.
Don't have to randomized control trial that.
Yeah, that's right.
And so for me, it's not only the weakness of the randomized control trials that I've read about nutrition. It's like, and we can talk, we'll talk about this ad infinitum ad nauseum. One of the things that really bothers me, and has forever, is they talk about they're going to test a low carb diet. Okay. And so they've got one arm of the study that's eating 60% carbs, as is recommended by the American diet, by the American Heart Association. And the other side is eating 30% carbs. Mm-hmm. And that's not low carb.
Right. That's
lower carb than what normal is, but that's not 3%. That's not 5%. That's still 30%.
Right.
And the point that Atkins made was that he doesn't have time to do randomized controlled trials. He found something that helps his patients. And as long as he's helping his patients and they're getting better, don't care.
Yeah, he has this trial.
And that has been the problem with keto, low carb, since I started looking at it, is that there's been no randomized control trials. Mm-hmm. And that is one way of gathering evidence, but that's not the only way of gathering evidence. Mm-hmm. Yep. Do you have, when you're in your practice, do you have trouble getting people to unlearn stuff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's part of the counseling, right? Whether they have the support, because then you've got the people around you that feel the same way, whether they grew up in whatever, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, so you've got that part you're trying to help them unlearn. But I think it's like anything where we grow up believing a certain thing, and we have a lot of things tied to that belief. So to take that away and just start to try eating,
it's uncomfortable
differently. It's uncomfortable in the back of your mind. You and I were talking about something before this, where with the playing in the street, right? There's something in the back of your mind that's like, I shouldn't be doing this, or this isn't right. Maybe it's everybody's used to reduce fat or fat free, and now you're just so ingrained to thinking, oh well, if I eat this full fat yogurt, I'm going to gain weight. And so then you have this stress, and there's other reactions in your body that happen. And so yes, there's some that is very hard. Some people it's very hard to unlearn, and I understand and respect that, and it takes some time. But I will say, it takes time. It takes time to fully change the mindset. It takes at least 3 months for somebody to really start changing their mindset. But the nice thing is you can get people to keep going when they see the difference and they feel the difference. And they're like, okay, well, something's working. I'll keep trying it. I trust her. I trust this. I'll keep trying it. And then you're constantly helping them, maybe not realizing it, but changing that mindset part. But you can't expect somebody out there can't expect themselves to just instantly change their mind. It's okay to question.
And one of the things that when I talk with people about this, and I'm certainly not I don't talk to as many people as you do, and I don't talk to them in the same way that you do. But when you're trying to make a change, one of the things I think is important is it's a lot easier to stop doing bad things than it is to start doing good things. If I'm going to get healthy, so I'm going to get up every morning and I'm going to do 25 push-ups and I'm going to run a mile and I'm going to, how about this, dude? How about you just quit eating a donut? Okay. Let's just, before you get to where you're trying to get to a marathon in 6 months, let's just start by not eating the donut.
Yeah.
If you can start taking things out, and changing your mindset by the way of saying, I'm going to make changes, that the first 5 changes are negative changes as opposed to positive changes. That's the way I have to do things. It's like, just if you quit doing the bad things, then you start finding out maybe there's some good things that you can do too.
I agree with you. I a little bit more go towards yes, but also replacing it. And a lot of people think they can change a habit. But really, Dr. Dennis Waitley's world-renowned, not psychiatrist. Yeah, psychiatrist. Oh my gosh, my mind went blank. Man.
Replace the behavior with a more positive behavior.
Yeah, so one of the things Dr. Dennis Waitley I've really learned a lot from is you can replace a habit. So many people think we have to change a habit. But we got to replace it with, okay, I'm not going to eat the donut. It's not that I can't have it. You could, but I am going to replace it with this instead, whether that's already having a nice thing of strawberries. Go ahead and put a little bit of cinnamon and sugar on top of it, or have an apple with some cinnamon sugar on top so you get that really good sweet taste. And you feel better and you feel healthier. And then there's so much into that on preparing your mind for that. But yeah, a lot of people think I'm just going to change, or I'm just going to stop this. And it's not that easy. But like you said, or on the flip side, I'm going to start working out. It's not that easy. We have to start with the small steps towards that. But if we can replace a habit, it lets our mind think, okay, well, I can do this. And so we're putting ourselves into that positive input. And then the mind will start to shift and change. But it takes, some people say 21 days for a habit to change, for you to change a habit. Some people say 2 months. I don't know. It's all different. I go with 21 days, but
so the path that you got on, for you, it was you didn't have a choice, and you don't have a choice now, because you will feel substantially worse if you start eating dairy. You're gonna have acne flare and things are gonna start swelling. If you drink a Pinot Noir, your knees hurt and your back starts hurting, and it's It's very closely tied. And that back to this discussion about how we got to where we are. As I've gotten older, now that I am officially old, my son told me, I said I was old so one time, and he said, "You're not old until you're 50." I said, and that day I turned old. And he said, "No, it's about 10% per year. It's like when you're 51, you're 10% old. And when you're 52, you're like 20% old. You don't get old until you're 60. Welcome to my world."
That is hilarious. He really thinks about these things. Interesting.
He's the one that's now in a biochemistry, microbiology PhD
I was going to
program.
say.
I mean, yeah.
That's really funny. That's cute.
Having that, now that I'm old.
Yeah. Okay.
When I was 30 years old and I was 40 pounds overweight, I still rode my bicycle 100-mile. I do centuries on the weekend and whatever. As I've gotten older, now having the extra weight, now having that weight is an issue.
Yeah.
Having the weight when I was younger really wasn't an issue. So if I wasn't as good about low carb, or I wasn't as good about not eating too much or whatever, there wasn't ever a sequela for me, because my blood work's great. My cholesterol's, everything is golden. There is in no way am I metabolically unhealthy. It's just a shadow. My behind weighs 30 pounds.
Okay.
Now I've gotten to an age in the past, and it's really been in the past 3 months that I went, you know what? I can't do this anymore, because the other day I dropped something in the garage and it rolled under the toolbox, and I got down on the floor to get this thing out of the toolbox. By the time I stood up, I was like, has the floor always been that so far? It seems like I must be getting taller, because the floor didn't used to be that far down.
It's definitely what it is.
So I'm getting taller. So, I know what to do. It's being rededicated to do it, and having a communicated driver that says you've got to do this is no longer an option. Which is why I was saying, I kind of admire the decision, the people that have a very fast feedback. I don't know if you've heard the bringing out the best in people, Bob.
Nope.
I have to look up the guy's name. It was a model that if you want to reinforce people, there are 3 continua that you need to, there's 3 choices. There's positive, negative reinforcement. Do you give people positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement? Okay. Do you give them immediate reinforcement or future reinforcement? And is the reinforcement certain or uncertain?
Okay. So
the most effective reinforcement is positive, immediate, certain reinforcement. I get a positive reinforcement immediately when I do something, and I get that reinforcement every time I do that thing.
Yes.
Okay. The most difficult way to change behavior is negative, future, and uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
Negative reinforcement is not as behavior shaping as positive reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it happens in the future temporally means that you do something and the result of what you do doesn't happen until sometime in the future. And if it's uncertain, the example that I use for this is seatbelts. Okay, if you don't use your seatbelt, if you use your seatbelt right now, it wrinkles your clothes, and you got to remember to do it. And if you don't use your seatbelt, you're going to get in a wreck maybe sometime down the road, and you may never get in a wreck. So really, the seatbelt thing is a negative, future, and uncertain feedback. So changing habits for me in terms of eating right. Now, the immediacy and the positivity of eating low carb has gotten better, because now I do see inflammation. At Christmas or Thanksgiving, if somebody brings a pie and it's a family thing, and I eat, the next day I can feel I'm creaky. I'm not like you paralyzed. I'm just, my feet or my ankles hurt, or my shoulder's a little sore.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's getting a lot easier to make those good decisions, because there's now immediate feedback. And that's a big part, I think, of the problem in getting people to change their mind. Going back to what you were saying about there's a lot of history about don't eat fat, fat bad, fat bad that you have there, especially when if you're over 40 years old, your entire life you've heard that fat is bad.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
So you've got that going on in the background all the time with you. It's fat bad, fat bad, fat bad, fat bad. And having a way to go allow yourself to make those changes is part of what you do that helps you, I think, continue down that journey that we both are on towards eating healthy and understanding how much that does for you. And that's the challenge, with my kids. It's like, dude, I know you're 31 years old and you can go to Taco Bell 3 times a day. It's not always going to be that way.
No. Yeah. And I think going to your point, it's not that even though I have that response, but I believe with pain, there's change. A lot of times we don't want to change until there's a pain. We don't change until there's an actual pain, which is unfortunate. And so that's why motivation is hard, right? Everybody says, I just need the motivation. I'll start on Monday. I just can't get motivated. Motivation is going to come and go so fast. It's fun when we get it, and then it goes away. And so it's hard, we don't want to wait for that pain to come back. And so you're not alone in that. I'm not alone in that. I'm definitely not perfect on my nutrition and fitness. There's times I get off, I get on, and I'm really good about it. But there's times, but I know what's going to happen and what's going to happen to my body. And so I know how to fix it and how to change it. And I think that's what people need to get to. But the other part is sticking with it. You got to keep sticking with it long enough to know, okay, when I start to go back, there's this thing that pulls me forward and there's this thing that pulls me away. And once I start getting off track, it's not the pie that the pie is bad. You eat the pie. Is that what comes after the pie?
It's
right.
It's that reinforcement. What kind of reinforcement do you get?
Yeah. So, I think obviously you're not alone. It's a mental game we play with ourselves until we fix it. The biggest thing is having the why, and it's the focus of why are you doing this? And once we lose focus, we're gone. If we don't have our focus in place, and there's ways to figure out your focus, I don't know if we talked about that last time, then everything just kind of goes away.
And my why got a lot stronger. My parents, I knew my great grandparents.
That's awesome.
Very well. Knew my great grandparents very well. My great grandfather was alive when I was born. I've got a picture. I've got a picture of me as the 5th generation, and I've got a picture of my son as the 5th generation. We've got 5 generation pictures.
That's amazing.
And so, my grandparents, because of the age people were having kids, were young.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
My grandfather would have been probably 48 when I was born.
Wow. That's amazing. Oh my goodness, I would love to know.
So my grandfather was 48 when I was born. And so when I was a kid, I would work with my grandfather, and he'd, digging ditches or fixing things on the house or crawling up on the roof or doing things. And now that I've got grandkids, I see impacts with either hurting or being unable to get on the floor or whatever, where the fact that I weigh more than I want to now gives me a why that I never had before.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Because it's creating an impact for me that I don't want it to create.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this arc of how we got to where we are, I think your why changes. In your life, your whys tend to change. Your kids are a why, and their kids are always a why. That never falls off.
Mm-hmm.
How do you visualize on this journey? We were talking about how you got started. Your why when you got started was certainly your own health.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're involved in it for podcasts and clients and a bunch of other things. Has your why, I guess, maybe hasn't changed but expanded?
Oh, that's a great question. It has expanded, absolutely, for my kids to be able to teach them and hope to teach other parents, teach their kids a little bit of, make sure I'm answering right, because that's a really great question. I hope I'm answering this in the way your question is asking. My why has changed to stay with it and to keep educated, because I need to teach my kids, and the same thing I just said, for parents to be able to teach their kids, and the way to help kids learn from the very beginning, but not only learn, but want to learn, right? Like, not just, oh, carrots make your eyes sparkle. That's the first step, right? Call broccoli trees. That's a fun way to do it. Make food fun. Broccoli makes you poop. We love to poop, that sort of thing. But also to help them grow through their teens. And I've got to keep learning and keep educating myself on how to talk to babies even, but toddlers, kids, teenagers, and to keep themselves healthy, to make America healthy again, to help our future generation, because that's our country. I mean, that's our world, is the young generation now, that's our future. And if we don't have our health, we don't have anything. Like, I don't care what anybody says, you can't give back to yourself. You can't be the person you're created to be if we don't have our health. And how do we get our health? Our food is the drug. Everything else is a bad drug, and food could be a bad drug too. And so my why is really expanded to keep going in that way, and to keep myself healthy, and to live and be that example. Because if I'm not, I don't focus well. I've got brain fog. I'm not good to my family. I wake up groggy. I don't exercise in the morning, which that sets the whole day different. I mean, there's just this rippling effect for me as myself, but also as a mom and a spouse, a wife. So,
and you know what's interesting to me is I've got really two friends, got a bunch of acquaintances, but one of my friends, we were Explorer Scouts together in 1976. Think about that.
Yeah. Okay.
It's 49 years.
That's amazing.
And my other good friend, we've been friends for 47 years.
Wow. I love it.
And one of them we were talking about something, and I said something about statins, which we'll talk about statins. I want to talk about statins.
Yeah, love it. Yes,
I said something about statins, and he was on statins. He was on blood pressure medicine, and we're in our mid-60s. And I said, you heard me talk about this a lot over the years, but you might think about just straight up going carnivore for 2 weeks. Try it for 14 days. And this was a year ago. Mm-hmm. He's lost 35 pounds. He's no longer on statins. He's no longer on any blood pressure medications. I mean, his life has completely changed. So one of the things that has become a why for me is I think this is a unique inflection point in the time that I have been talking about keto and low carb. Because I've been talking about this with friends and family for almost 30 years. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And part of it is, they're like, you're talking to me about this, lard butt. What do you like? It's really working for you. But we now have the conversation has changed. The conversation is now beginning to change in fundamental ways. One of the things, and we talked about this earlier when we were talking about science, Atkins couldn't get things funded. The NIH wasn't going to fund anything that had to do with keto because we know the answer to this. Right. It would be like you're going to put together a study to see if the sun comes up in the east. Really? We're not going to waste money on that. We know the sun comes up in the east. And everybody knew that fat caused heart disease and saturated fats are bad and that seed oils are much more healthy. And everybody knew those things. This is, I think, for me, an inflection point for us to do podcasts and start talking to people, and that you're not going to hopefully have as much headwind to make changes as we've had in the past, because there's a broader discussion going on in society about how do we solve the problems, because back to the point that we were talking about earlier, now there's a driver for people to start questioning this. You know what reinsurance companies are? Mm-hmm. You ever heard of Swiss Re is the largest reinsurance company. Okay. Reinsurance companies insure insurance companies. Okay. Insurance companies put together their actuarial tables, and they say this is how long people are going to live, and given that this is how long people are going to live, this is how many people are going to die a year, and given this is how many people are going to die a year, this is how much your life insurance policy is going to cost.
Okay.
So there's been these actuarial tables that were created 25, 30 years ago that showed increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
About 5 years ago, lifespan started decreasing.
Mm.
So these life insurance companies have over the years written a whole bunch of policies that have trillions of dollars out there on when the payoff is going to come. And all of those actuarial tables are now wrong because people are starting to die early because they've got primarily metabolic disorders, and the sequela for the metabolic disorders are type 2 diabetes and heart disease and blood pressure and stroke and cardiovascular disease and all this stuff. So Swiss Re is the reinsurance company in Switzerland that has billions and billions and billions of dollars out insuring these insurance companies. And Swiss Re has gone, oh my God. Now there is significant numbers that the insurance companies are now starting to be the drivers for. We need to study this. We need to get smart about this. And if we don't, there's going to be a collapse in the industry in 15 years or in 20 years. And so you've got a financial driver that really hasn't been there before. You've got a new administration and possibly a new Health and Human Services guy in Bobby Kennedy that's going to drive that discussion more. So a lot of my why is not only for me to be sitting on the floor playing with my kids, but in the same way, if we don't fix the why for the way the 18 and 20-year-olds are eating, it is going to have a material effect on our children as they get older because of the government programs they're going to have to go to pay for the people that have diabetes and pay for the people who have joint replacements and cutting things off and that's starting younger and younger and younger with 12-year-olds getting non-alcoholic fatty liver disease from the high fructose corn syrup.
It's amazing. And all those plastics and the GMOs and the phthalates and all of that we're ingesting will affect our future. It affects my kids, their kids. That's what the DNA is. It travels down. And so, yeah, I'm thankful that the world, I know we're probably about to wrap up, but I am thankful. I'm so thankful, even though we've made just a little dent from RFK or like, especially with Red 3, being banned. That's like, I mean, that was an easy one for them, right? I mean, that was banned in cosmetics 30 years ago. That was an easy one. So I'll take it because even though it's so little and there's so much that's still in their chemicals of food additives, anybody if you're not reading ingredients, people are probably having, 50 plus chemicals, additives in their body every single day. Anyway, when we're doing that, let's just say this. I'm just thankful that RFK has made this little dent so people are starting to just be like, I need to look into this.
Okay, so
care more about my health.
Back to the theme and closing out with that. Back to the theme of the podcast and why we're doing this. Okay, you get elected nutritionist plenipotentiary, and you get to say, okay, here are the 5 things. I mean, there's a long list of things that we could talk about and that you want to address, from microplastics to GMOs to glyphosate to, there's a list of vaccines. There's a running ton of things that we will talk about in how you make eating healthy again. What are the 5 top steps that you would tell someone here in order are the 5 things you need to do to start your process of eating healthy again?
So if people were going to take something from today and say, I'm just going to look at this, because I would love to be like, get all the phthalates out of your house.
Quit drinking water out of a bottle and don't vaccinate your kids, and anything that says GMO will kill you.
Yeah, I would love for you to go to the extreme. Be crazy with me. But I would say the first thing, if you were to take anything from today, right? And you're talking like small picture, right?
Well, 5 things. If somebody said, what are the 5 things I need to do? What's the first thing I need to do, then the second thing, and the third thing to start eating healthy again?
So I'd say read ingredient labels. And if there are more than, let's say, 4 ingredients, it's a no. Also, if you can't pronounce what's on there and you can't go find butyrate in the grocery store, it's not something that you need to eat.
If you don't recognize it in nature, don't eat it. They
That's
don't
right.
have juice boxes on trees. They got apples.
Yeah, that's right. Same thing with trans fats. I gotta get something.
Okay, so read labels. Number 1. What's number 2?
Number 2 is start some type of movement every day. I don't care if it's 5 minutes. Some type, and I really mean that, some type of mental, like you went out and you listened to a podcast or something to where you moved your body hard, to where you couldn't be able to carry on a full conversation. Some type of movement in the day to just get out of your mind on that. And number 3 would be taking out any vegetable oils. If you see vegetable oil, corn oil, any seed oils, they are one of the highest inflammatory foods in our body. The other thing would be to take out any high fructose corn syrup. Like the absolute, one of the worst things in our body. High fructose corn syrup and seed oils and trans fat are like the top 3 that I would say you've just got to get out of your body.
And the 5th thing?
I'm trying to keep it simple and easy. Don't microwave your food in plastic. Don't eat out of plastic containers. Because that BHT and BPA is like, it's just straight soaking into our food. It's bad enough that the food that we eat is covered in plastic and heated in plastic. But then just putting in a plastic container is something really easy to just throw all that plastic away. Give yourself $100 limit or give yourself a $30 limit and go buy some Pyrex food containers and use that. But you got to throw all the plastic away. You're still going to use it. Those would be my top 5.
Then I would say.
What would you say?
I would say, quit eating carbohydrates.
Yep.
And I mean, as a first step, just quit eating carbohydrates.
All you mean?
Well, to the extent that you can.
Okay.
But I change your macro intake to where you're 75-80% fat, and then enough protein to be healthy, and then the remainder in carbohydrates.
Okay.
And I think.
So because you're leaning more towards carnivore.
Well, I lean more towards carnivore, but in
ketovore, I think, is what you're more into.
If I'm leaning more towards, I think the hardest thing for people to change is to get out of carbohydrates. And that's the thing that's like, you got to number 1, quit eating carbs. Number 2, quit eating seed oils.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 would be sugar and high fructose corn syrup anyway. Now, I say that advisedly because if you quit eating carbs and you quit eating seed oils, it's really hard to find sugar.
Yeah, right. If you look at eating less than 25 grams a day, that's going to be really hard to get sugar in.
Number 4 is sunlight or vitamin D. Either supplement vitamin D or in that process of moving, get outside and get sunlight or vitamin D. If that's the only thing that I supplement, I think that everybody should either supplement it or be aware of it. It's vitamin D.
1,000%.
And the 5th thing is prioritize your sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Because after you take out the carbs and the seed oils and you're careful of sugar and you start getting some sunlight, then the next thing to do is get back to where you're tracking and paying attention to restorative sleep, because that's going to fundamentally change everything else.
Yes.
And that's where I've gotten to over this 25-year, 27-year, almost 30-year learning about how to get there. Yeah,
I love that you said that. Sleep is everything. It really is. It's the root cause of where our hormones start to be disrupted, which is all the messengers in our body. And we'll get into that another day, but I love that.
Then
Great.
We'll wrap it up there and we'll do it again and talk about what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll see it in the comments. I'm sure we'll have people
enjoyed it
that will give us some ideas. Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.